All right, football season is finally over. The New England Patriots, they are Super Bowl champions. Super Bowl 51 is in the books. Tom Brady has won the Super Bowl MVP. I feel like I've been saying this. I feel like this should be a repetitive thing by now. I've never seen a dynasty quite like this before. But the Patriots are the 5-time Super Bowl champions in their franchise history. That's some good stuff. That game, I'm not going to say that was one of the greatest Super Bowl games of all time. I agree with Judd Zulgad on 1500 ESPN saying it was just a terrible game for the most part. It was one of the greatest comebacks and greatest finishes in the Super Bowl game. But as far as games are concerned, that was just terrible. If you guys have been following and listening, the last week's podcast when I predicted that the Patriots would win in a blowout. Actually, I was wrong about that. But the one thing that I was nervous about was that this whole NFL season, and especially these playoffs, has just been a letdown. There's been little to no competition throughout this entire season. And in these playoffs, I believe I read in New York Times New York Times it was, that the average margin of victory in these playoffs was about 15.6 points per game. These games have not been competitive in the regular season or the playoffs. My thing was that this Super Bowl I was fearful that this Super Bowl would be reminiscent of the Seahawks-Broncos Super Bowl a couple of years ago. And it started off that way. I thought the Patriots would blow out the Falcons. It was actually in reverse. The Falcons were smashing the Patriots. The Patriots, for as prepared as Bill Belichick and Tom Brady is, for as much as they prepare for every single game, they look like they were not prepared for the Falcons at all. I was wrong about the Falcons' defense. Their defense showed up. And not to take anything away from the Falcons, I was just calling it like it is. The Falcons caught a couple of breaks in these playoffs. And not to take anything away from the Falcons, I said that the Falcons would beat the Seahawks in the second round because the Seahawks' offensive line is one of the worst in football. I also thought that Earl Thomas being out was going to do damage for the Seahawks because you were going against Julio Jones. Now, Julio Jones didn't necessarily have a great game, but he did have 6 catches for, I believe, 66 yards and a touchdown. And then that next game in the NFC Championship game, I thought the Packers would win, but they caught a couple of breaks in that game as well because the Packers defense is god-awful. We already know that. But outside of Aaron Rodgers, the offensive players of the Packers didn't show up to play. Just a lot of boneheaded plays, penalties, things like that. And the Falcons, they were on focus. They were doing their thing. You can't take anything away from them. You can't blame them for being focused while the Packers were not. I just thought that going against the Patriots, this was going to be the first team that they faced in the playoffs, coincidentally in the Super Bowl, that had no weaknesses. The Patriots, they've got a good defense, good offense. They adjust every single week. They've got Tom Brady. I thought they would get smashed, but it turns out the Falcons were smashing the Patriots. The Patriots did not look prepared whatsoever. Their offense was hitting on all cylinders. Their defense, I was wrong about their defense. They were kicking ass. They were getting to Tom Brady. They were getting after it. Their offensive line, the Patriots, they were looking a little shaky for the first 3 quarters, really. And then the Patriots ended up coming back and having one of the greatest finishes in Super Bowl history. Now, there's a couple of things in this Super Bowl as far as a couple of topics that's been brought up, and we'll talk about the rest of the game and how that went. Immediately after the Super Bowl, I don't know the guy's name. He works for Sunday Night Football. I think he also works for Pro Football Talk or Pro Football Focus. I can't remember which one. But he was basically saying after the Super Bowl, we need to change the overtime rules. I want to see both teams have a chance to have the ball in possession, everything like that. Well, I'm sorry. The Falcons were up 25 points before the Patriots scored in the third quarter with 2 minutes left. And then going into the fourth quarter, you were up 19 points. I'm sorry. I'm not one of these people. I'm not one of those guys that likes to go back and say, yeah, this happened, but you should have done this or that. Like, we compare that to the Golden State Warriors blowing a 3-1 lead, right? Everyone says, well, the Warriors blew a 3-1 lead, and they did. And I blame Steph Curry for that for the most part because in the last 2 finals, he has not played like an MVP, especially a unanimous MVP in the last finals. But one thing we can't ignore with the 3-1 blown lead in the finals was that the league interfered. They let LeBron James get away with instigating that altercation with Draymond Green. They suspended Draymond Green and gave a technical foul to LeBron James, which wasn't worth a damn. The difference in this situation is there was no interference. There was no officiating interference or anything like that. The Falcons just got straight up beat. They just straight up blew a 25-point lead up until 2 minutes in the third quarter. You're up 19 going in the fourth. I don't want to hear nothing about the Falcons should have had the ball in overtime. Now, if this was the same rules as far as if you kick a field goal in overtime, the game is over, I get that, because we were Vikings fans. We were on the receiving end of that in the 2009 NFC Championship game, where I was saying we lost off a kick, and I'm just like, that's ridiculous. I like the rules now where it's like, if it's a kick, you still get the ball, but you still need to hold them out the end zone. I know college football, they have different rules where each team, they get an offensive possession. But I like in pro football that there's higher stakes involved. Now, if the opposing team makes a kick, you get the ball back. But if you can't keep them out the end zone, that's a you problem. And I'm sorry, I don't want to hear about overtime with the Falcons. The Falcons should have got the ball back, because you had the ball 4 times. 4 times, Atlanta, after the Patriots scored with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, in which they missed the extra point. You were up 19 going in the fourth quarter. You blew it. You had the ball. You had the ball on offense 4 times. You punted the ball 3 times, and you fumbled the ball away on 1 possession. And one of those, I believe the possession before last that they had, you could have ended the game if you just ran the ball and kicked the field goal. But instead, you ran the ball once, got a loss of yard for about 1 play. You tried to throw the ball. There was a holding. You got sacked a couple of times, and then you went out of field goal position, which you already were, and then you ended up punting the ball away. That was the ultimate choke job. So I don't want to hear nothing about, they should have had the ball in overtime. Then when you talk about the fact that people are saying, oh, well, I don't remember if it was James White or Deion Lewis that scored that touchdown, where they were saying, oh, the ball didn't cross the plane. I saw it live. The ball crossed the plane. I saw it on replay. The ball crossed the plane. It was a touchdown. So, getting back to the game, the Falcons had the ball 4 times after the Patriots scored, in which they missed the extra point. Now, Vikings fans, we know about missed extra points. Now, the Patriots scored their first touchdown with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, and then they missed the extra point. Vikings fans, we know that with Blair Walsh. We know the grind it takes when you finally get that touchdown and you miss the extra points. It just takes everything. It's almost deflating, no pun intended, towards Tom Brady, but it's almost deflating. You work that hard to get a touchdown, you miss the extra point. But they ended up coming back. And then on defense, the Falcons had a chance to really take the ball away when Tom Brady threw that, as what Richard Sherman said about Peyton Manning before they played in Super Bowl a couple years ago. Tom Brady threw a duck up in the air. Everyone in the world, the friends that we were with at their house, we were watching it. We were saying to ourselves, oh, that's intercepted. That's intercepted. I don't remember who it was that was putting themselves in position before he tripped up on that deep bomb that Tom Brady threw, but it was a duck. It was up for grabs to Julian Edelman with 3 Falcons defenders surrounding him. And look, Tom Brady has been on the receiving end of incredible, immaculate catches. There was David Tyree in that first Super Bowl against the Giants. And then there was the Seahawks guy. I believe they picked up off the street when they played the Seahawks. And then that guy had a miraculous catch before, leading up to the Seahawks getting to the 1-yard line before they ultimately threw the ball, getting picked off by Malcolm Butler, opposed to running the ball with Marshawn Lynch, which I'm sure they still regret to this day. Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks do. But the Patriots they got one of those miraculous catches when Julian Edelman. I don't like to power rank things. I don't like to do unnecessary power rankings, but I'm sorry. That catch that Julian Edelman had is more memorable to me than that David Tyree catch. I think they were both incredible catches, but that was some Matrix type stuff that Julian Edelman did. He bobbled it 3 times and caught it basically on the 1 inch, an inch away from hitting the ground, from hitting the turf. That was amazing, man. So the Patriots, they did their thing. They moved up. Tom Brady's 5-time Super Bowl champion. Roger Goodell handed that trophy. I think the league owners, they're going to have to fire Roger Goodell at some point, because the NFL prides itself off of, sticking it to the players. It's an owners league. It's not a players league. Players come a dime a dozen. They're always replaceable. But Tom Brady is the one player in NFL history that we've seen, quote unquote, stick it to the man, where, Roger Goodell, he's coming after you, Deflategate for 2 years, and then he comes back, wins the Super Bowl. You spend him for 4 games. He wins the Super Bowl and wins Super Bowl MVP. That's some fantastic stuff. Other stuff in the NFL we're going to talk about later on in the next couple of weeks, because I want to talk about some NBA stuff in the midseason awards coming up. Terrell Owens getting snubbed again in the Hall of Fame. It is a crime that he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. What Vikings, Adrian Peterson talking about he wants to play for this team or that team. Now sources, reports are saying that he's open to playing for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to wait until that whole thing gets resolved with the Vikings and whichever team Adrian Peterson ends up on. I don't think he's going to be a Viking, but anyway, we're going to talk about some NBA midseason awards coming up. This is Realistic Randy, Mediocre at Best podcast.
Can change my lane, my way, my name is Trey. I made a way in a maze.